The fire service has been described as 200 years of tradition, unimpeded by progress. I don't necessarily subscribe to that statement, but there are times when it does describe the fire department culture. Organizational culture is the behavior of humans within an organization and the meaning that people attach to those behaviors. Culture includes artifacts such as the organization's vision, values, norms, systems, symbols such as these bugles on my collar, language, assumptions, beliefs, and habits. I want to share my experience with the integration of fire and emergency medical services in the fire department where I used to work, and the challenges presented by having competing organizational cultures. As you hear this story, be alert for the role of these artifacts of organizational culture. For most of the fire department's history, it was, like most fire departments at that time, primarily focused on fighting and preventing fires. In 1973, the department hand-selected several top firemen, as they were called then, and put them through many months of paramedic training. Upon graduation from paramedic school, the new medics were put to work on new fire department ambulances and given their own uniforms, rank structure, and leadership. These were highly specialized personnel with technical training and terminology. They soon became more associated with the hospital medical community than others in the fire department, even though they worked out of the same fire stations and worked the standard 56-hour firefighter work week. By the time I was hired in 1985, the paramedic program had fully matured. Some of the original medics had since retired, and new ones had been hired with no firefighting background. I came to the department as a certified emergency medical technician, but because of the existence of the paramedics, was told there was no use for my certification and was urged to let it lapse, which I did. So while the paramedics had become more elite and specialized, the firefighters were becoming less so and further removed from medical care. The paramedics were fond of saying things like, "You could train a monkey to be a firefighter." And the firefighters referred to the paramedics as almost God, but not quite a doctor. By then, the medics had become very busy, with EMS calls accounting for over 70% of all fire department activity. The medics and the firefighters were on divergent paths, but that changed abruptly in 1994 when the paramedics filed and won a major lawsuit against the city. The Fair Labor Standards Act, which established the standard 40-hour work week that we're all familiar with, and that requires employers to pay overtime for additional hours, had an exception for firefighters. Unlike most workers, under the FLSA, the firefighters can work up to 53 hours per week before becoming eligible for overtime. The basis for the paramedics' lawsuit was that they were no longer firefighters and therefore entitled to overtime for all hours beyond 40 per week. Including back pay, the city was made to pay $1.4 million distributed among 41 paramedics. That was a lot of money back then, and still is today. This, of course, sparked outrage within the ranks. To resolve the situation going forward, the department had two choices. One, they could start paying the paramedics 16 hours of overtime each week, or they could put the paramedics on a shorter 40-hour work week and hire more of them. There was a third option. Train all the paramedics to be firefighters and therefore applicable to the 56-hour work week, and this was the option that was ultimately chosen. Correspondingly, all the firefighters were also trained to become EMTs. This process became known as integration. As you can imagine, it was fraught with trouble and conflict. It took over 15 years, but the department eventually developed into a high-performing emergency medical services and firefighting organization, and the integration of their fire and EMS systems became a model for other fire departments to follow.